Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. I am once again going on another adventure. In a couple hours, I am getting a car ride to the airport in order to fly to India. It's going to be my first time in Asia. That's pretty exciting. It is the farthest I will have ever traveled once I get through the trip, because I will literally be on the other side of the world. I think I've packed what I can at this point. I know from experience I'm probably not going to get time to talk to you in the airport. Things tend to happen pretty quickly once I get there. So the next time I'm going to be talking to you in your video, I should have made the flight over and experience whatever adventure happened on the flight then. Welcome to India. I am currently drinking a delightful peach iced tea in perhaps one of the bougiest hotel rooms I have ever been in my life. In my recent travels, the only thing that really comes close is the hotel room, and I'm stunned that this place is dedicated just for me. Also, I've been awake for a super long time, so I might be a bit scatterbrained because it was a long flight. It was a good flight, but it was a long flight. It was a pretty uneventful trip to JFK. We happened to beat rush hour traffic, and I got there an hour earlier than we were expecting, which was amazing. I walked into the terminal. I went to go catch a flight from Air India, and the one thing that was very apparent to me from the moment I walked in is that they have a lot of people hired to give a very personalized service. They have the individual check-in kiosks, but they have a human by the check-in kiosk to help you out, which is handy. In order to get into India, I had to get an e-visa, and I was lazy and didn't bother printing it out. I just kept the PDF on my phone because you can still scan barcodes from a phone as long as you have your brightness all the way up. Not the case for those kiosks. There were several times overall, like later throughout the day, when it would have been handier if I just had a paper copy of it. But the staff was so friendly. There were 3 people who came over to help me before I was ultimately redirected to the go have a human check you in line. That ended up being very auspicious because while I was waiting in line, I ran into the person who I was supposed to meet. The person who is the person in charge for our tour. So I introduced myself to her. We got along amazingly, and we ended up having another person from our group come over because something happened with her baggage as well, and we got our baggage in. And usually when I'm in a line like that, if I'm traveling by myself, I won't follow anyone else. But the person who's running the tour tapped me on my arm and said, "Here, you're gonna come up with me." She was trying to make sure that we were all together as early as she possibly could. We ended up having a good portion of the group together before we even went through TSA. TSA went about as smoothly as you could hope for. Was there a lot of people? Yeah, there's always a lot of people at JFK, but they kept the line moving, and the only reason I got stopped was I left my face mask around my neck instead of putting it in the bin. Then we all went to the gate. In JFK, there's the nail polish robot. I ended up trying out the nail polish robot when I was last at JFK for going to Kenya. I was fully planning on using it this time, but then I ultimately decided against it because I was hungry and food was more important. By the time I had gotten my food, I only had a half hour left, which I was in a gate that started with A, and the nail polish robot is at B24, so it would have been pushing it. I ended up finding this breakfast sandwich place right next to the gate I was supposed to be in. They called it the Melt Shop, and I had an egg sandwich, and I'm very, very thankful that I had it. I also had the drink smooth to help counteract the dehydration that I knew I was going to be going through. At the gate that we're staying at, we found out that the particular airplane that we're going on, the Airbus, was a brand new Airbus. It was the absolute first time that this thing was going to be flying with passengers in it, and we were on its maiden voyage. So they had a little photo shoot there, and you could take a picture with these cardboard signs that were related to the Airbus and promoting Air India. And they also had another photographer who's just taking pictures for their promotional stuff. Some of the other ladies in the group ended up going to get their pictures first, and I watched their bags, and then we reversed and they watched my bag while I went to go get a picture. But it was some pretty nice stuff in there. Not only did they give you the picture for free, but they also gave you this certificate saying I was part of the maiden voyage, and they gave you a little keychain with an airplane on it, and they gave you a cookie. Let me tell you, that cookie has come in handy already. I was hungry and I already had the cookie. One of the other ladies that was part of my tour group was nervous about the fact that it was a brand new airplane. She's like, I like them a little bit broken in, but her husband reassured her it's perfectly fine. And the nice thing about having a brand new airplane is nothing is broken yet. So everything should be working. And it was. Going into the Air India airplane was pretty nice. I was expecting it to be done up in orange, but it was actually like done up in this nice red and purple color scheme. I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that I had an aisle seat. I ended up sitting next to one of the ladies from the tour. I was in the aisle seat, she was in the middle seat, and then the other aisle seat was empty. She was like, ooh, if this person doesn't show up, we get a nice little buffer space. And I was like, ooh, but that didn't happen. The other person showed up. But something that I didn't realize about traveling on Air India until I actually got on the plane is that when it comes to the media entertainment, you have access to a bunch of Bollywood movies. When you live in the States, that's something that isn't typically streamed through your normal streaming services that you know of. You have to specifically go and search them out if you want to watch Bollywood stuff. It doesn't really have a presence in the United States because we have the whole Hollywood thing, but Bollywood is a big production thing in its own right, yeah? So I ended up watching quite a few Bollywood movies. I watched this entire one called Tara and Bilal, which had to do with the two main characters having a fake marriage that turned real. They had some modern movies, but they also had some retro movies, like 70s, 80s, 90s retro movies. They had some in the 50s too, but I tried watching this one called Nagina, but I ended up only watching half of it because shortly after that I got tired and I decided I needed to try to sleep. I ended up watching the full movie of English Finglish, which is about this Indian mother who only really speaks Hindi. She doesn't really speak English all that well, but she ends up coming to New York to help plan the wedding for a female relative. She ends up using the time that she's there to take an English class, and she surprises her entire family by learning how to speak English properly because her family was ridiculing her English knowledge. That was probably the best movie out of the ones I saw. And I also watched half of this movie called Rocky and Reina. They tried to get the grandparents together and then the grandkids got together, but then they ended up doing a family switching thing. It was around the time they did the family switching thing that I ended up turning it off. They also had the maps well done for the plane as well. So they have a whole digital globe that you can zoom in and it can show you the path that you take. And from JFK, we ended up going along the Canadian coast, up over Iceland and Reykjavik, and then coming back down over Eastern Europe, and then over the farther edge of the Middle East, and then we hit Delhi. And I was like, oh yeah, they're keeping us close to land as close as possible. So you could see the different path that's there, but also what I didn't realize till later is that they are using satellite images of the place, so you can really zoom in and actually start seeing like the individual roads. You can zoom in that far on the globe, which was impressive. I ended up zooming in on Philly because I was curious, and their ability to zoom in on Philly is not as detailed as it would be for India, because why would India zoom in on Philadelphia? But it's still impressive how close you're able to get. Like, I could actually point out the general city outline. This was like a nature map. This wasn't a political map. But in addition to that, they had a kids map, which I looked at. What makes a kids map special is on various parts of the map, there are little 3D renderings of dinosaurs. And you can click on the dinosaurs and they can tell you all sorts of different facts about the dinosaurs. They also have a little picture of the dinosaur there, and then you can click on the different options of the dinosaur and you can do things like attack, shake its head, act surprised, which seemed like the weirdest one to me, like nod, run. It's pretty adorable. Around where Texas would be, they had the Dilophosaurus, which is the closest to what I would usually tell people is my favorite dinosaur if they ask. Growing up, my favorite dinosaur was the Brontosaurus, but I don't think the Brontosaurus actually exists now. I think the Dilophosaurus is what the Brontosaurus was supposed to be. They also had cameras attached to the outside of the plane. So they had one attached to the front and they had one attached to the tail. So you can actually choose that option and then you can see the plane land, or you can see the ground over which the plane is flying. I ended up using it to watch the plane land because, hey, that was pretty cool. You don't typically get to see that. The stewards and stewardesses of this airplane were top notch. The way that they seem to work for all the meals except breakfast is they assigned like a certain section to a different person and they took care of that section. So for most of the flight, I was served by a very lovely lady named Sandra. She went above and beyond. In one of the movies, I ended up finding out about this Indian food I never heard of before. I think it's called a labu. I'm gonna put the correct name down here. I ended up asking her, do you know what this is? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, what type of food is it? And it turns out it's a sweet. It could contain a variety of things, but it's like flour, and then there's like other sweets they put maybe coconut or nuts in it. Apparently it's very common in India, so I'm going to be on the lookout to have one before I leave. But yeah, they fed us well. There was so much food. Although all 3 meals did have chicken in them. I did ask for chicken each time because I do know lots of people might go for the vegetarian option if they have a lot of food sensitivities. I had a chicken curry rice dish for the first one, and the second one was like a chili chicken curry rice dish. They had an eggless chocolate cake for the first meal and an eggless vanilla cake for the second meal. And then the first meal, the side dish was chickpeas. And the second meal, the side dish was some sort of potato salad. It looked like glazed apple slices, but when you bit into them, it had a savory flavor to it and not the sweet flavor that I was expecting. But something that struck me as odd was they had a little carton of milk, and I'm not talking like a carton of milk that a elementary school child would receive with a school lunch. I'm talking more like the amount of milk that you get with a coffee creamer. And I was like, well, I don't really have coffee, and I'm guessing later on when they're collecting this stuff and they give coffee and tea later, that's just so people have it and it's one less thing for the stewardess to give out. But what struck me as smart for doing it with Air India is some of the meals they are serving are spicy. Not all the food is spicy. There was at least one non-spicy food there in the meal, but the milk was there. There was a little roll of bread there as well to counteract the spicy food, because what are the 2 most effective ways of dealing with spicy food? Eating bread, drinking milk, right? So it's like, oh, this is a way to deal with that. That's pretty cool. I ate the entirety of the bread both times. I also have someone else's bread in my bag right now. Our last meal was like a chicken burrito type of deal. It was a chicken curry burrito that I had. I think the vegetarian options had cottage cheese, which is not really something that I typically eat anyway, so I just held off on that. But there is some spice to it. There's some kick. I ended up getting some water. They put some water there as well, which was nice. To help put in perspective for the rest of the series of these videos on where my comfort level with spice foods are, I'm absolutely the white person who cannot handle their spice. On a scale of 1 to 10, about the spiciest that I like eating without automatically putting it out of my mouth is about a 4. A 4 is what I would consider crab fries from a stadium. If you go to a stadium and you get like Chickies and Pete's crab fries, that's about a 4 on a 10 of the spiciness level, provided that the person didn't oversaturate the spices. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting this trip to see how often I come across spicy food, because it's definitely going to be spicier than I am used to eating. But I also know India has a huge vegetarian culture, so I imagine not all the vegetarian meals will be spicy. I think at the very least they'll probably be like plain naan bread. So I don't have any doubts that I'm gonna get fed. It's just whether I'm going to like the food, which I will only find out when I taste it. It also means that if I don't like the food, it does not mean that these people are bad cooks. It's more just my personal taste palette. Kind of disclaimer over the whole bit. There were also a lot of little kids on this flight. There were multiple infants, and there were also several kids, like elementary school aged. I was sitting near a kid that I later found out was in the 2nd grade. because he told me. But yeah, there's one point where I just saw a kid like sitting in the airport chair with his feet up above the seat, above the headrest, and it was like, man, to be that young, that position is comfortable. The infants were crying because that's what babies do, and the parents were doing the best that they could. They were constantly walking the infants up and down the aisle and trying to keep them calm. Sitting 13 hours on a flight is hard for an adult human to do. So when I hear the babies wailing, it's like, yes, baby, same. I feel you there. The one little kid that was sitting near me was a very exuberant little kid. Very loud. Some of the things he was saying was whiny, but some of it was just comedy gold. There was one point where he just said on the flight, "Why am I not wearing my seatbelt when the seatbelt light is turned on?" It's like, wow, way to call out your parents. As we were landing, when the plane touched the ground with the wheels, he went like, Jesus Christ. And then he's like, oh, we're still good. We're on the ground, but we're still going. We're probably gonna end up going back up again. And while we were doing this, he was going like, slow clap, slow clap. I am being completely normal. And then later on, when the plane was landed and the announcements were made in Punjabi, the people who could understand Punjabi started clapping. And he's like, why are all these people clapping? Like, dude, you were just clapping yourself, but okay. Side note, one of the things that I thought was really nice about the flight was the announcements were made in 2 different languages. So the announcements were made in English because English is basically the language of airlines everywhere. But the announcements were also made in Punjabi, which is a language that's common here in India. I'm just very glad that the languages were made to be accessible to everyone who was on the flight. I was surprised that it was Punjabi and not Hindi. Hey, whatever works, right? While we were waiting for the plane to clear out, the little kid was like, oh, there must be at least 900 people on this plane. So that's when I figured, hey, he was standing right next to me. I can start talking to this kid. So it's like, well, not quite 900, but you could probably figure it out, right? We know there are 40 rows in this plane, and we know there are 9 seats across, so you can multiply that. And when he started making his answers, I realized he may not know multiplication tables yet. Although he did very shortly brag after that he did know his multiplication tables, but he's still learning. And he mentioned how his brain makes a lot of errors with the processing. It's like he goes really fast. It's like he's a calculator, but not when there's tests. He ends up ever finding this later on. Buddy, you were very enjoyable to talk to. You were very entertaining throughout the flight. After we left the flight, I didn't have far to go until I ran into the majority of my group, because I knew the group leader was sitting in front of me, farther forward in the plane. And I knew if her status quo was let's wait for everybody, that I would run into her eventually, which is exactly what happened. So that's what we did. So then we all walked together as a group, except some of us walked faster than others. And that's when we got pushed around to different stalls. First we were standing in the foreign passport line, but there's a difference. It's like foreign passport is one, Indian national is another, and then there's e-visa. But what they don't necessarily make clear is that the e-visa will be accepting of the foreign passport. So I'm standing in the foreign passport line thinking like, it's not an e-visa line, will they be able to accept what I got? I ended up getting directed to an e-visa line, which I found out had the foreign passport thing on there. And then while we were standing in line, 2 employees come up and tell us that we can stand in a different line. Then while we're on our way to the other station, we get stopped by another employee who directs us to another station. That's not the one that we were told to go to. So it's like, okay, so we ended up going to that third one, and I was there with 2 people from the group. It was a couple, and despite the fact that I literally learned their names about 5 minutes before this happened, I guess we were giving up a front of being together enough that when one of the people had a communication problem with the immigrant officer, like he ended up looking to me to explain what was going on, which I could explain. I kind of knew what happened. It was a case of both sides were misunderstanding what the other said. One of them just needed to repeat himself. If I'm with a group tour and I know who the people are, I'll try to follow the people, because if I'm with somebody else, at least I'm lost with somebody and not necessarily lost by myself. But then one of the people ended up having a cane and they gave him a shortcut. So it's like, wait, where did he disappear to? Why is he standing at another window? But then they let me go into like, oh, you can actually go in this way. So I went in the back way because I could walk. And then it's like, you'll meet him over there in the end. So it's like, cool. We also had to fill out these little forms for like foreign passports, which some questions were confusing, but most of it was easy peasy. And then after that, we went to pick up our luggage. I become slightly worried the moment that I see that there's a bunch of luggage already standing around the baggage claim. And it's like, oh, there was luggage here and they took it off. It's like, okay, now I need to find out how many piles of this luggage is like this, and was my luggage one of the ones that was taken off, because I'm seeing a lot, like I'm getting nervous because one of my suitcases is black, which is not necessarily a color that I enjoy having my suitcase, because over half the suitcases are black. So you have to look really hard to make sure that it's your suitcase and not someone else's. It's the same reason why I'm not fond of gray cars. But I'm standing there. I see a bunch of other Craftour ones and I'm not seeing mine come around. And one of the other Craftour people that I'm with ends up coming up to me like, where's your suitcase? Do you know that it's around? And I'm like, oh yeah, I've looked there, but mine's pretty obvious. Like mine is mint green. I can look at mine from like yards and yards away and know that it's mine. She ended up getting both of my suitcases for me. I saw mine come up the thing and it's like, yep, that's mine. Fortunately, the baggage went a lot less stressful than it could have been. So then we all get together as a group and we walk towards customs again, but then we end up getting directed through customs without having to walk through them. I guess it was only for Indian nationals. We end up going into the gate part where it's like, oh, you are now out beyond all semblance of having to be searched. And we meet our other tour guide for the tour, who is someone who lives in India and can guide us around the country. So he has a Craftours sign. The marketing is very helpful there. We end up going right out. All of us are pretty much together pretty quickly. There's about 24 of us in the group. I think I can say with absolute certainty that I am once again the youngest. There's one person who's close, but I'd be willing to bet that she's probably like late 30s, early 40s, maybe 50s. But yeah, I am the youngest by a long shot for most of the group. We ended up going out to the parking area to catch our bus. And the first thing that hit me as we walked out is the entire sky is hazy. It's like, wow. I had taken my mask off at this point, but it's like, should I put it back on? I ended up not doing so. I may regret that later. It turns out Delhi has a bit of a smog problem and they are working on combating that. But we are also coming right after Diwali, and apparently the smog gets a little bit worse around the holidays. So we're probably dealing with the effects of that. That's also why I'm wearing this marigold garland. Our Indian tour guide ended up giving us a Maryland garland to welcome us to India, which was an incredibly nice gesture on his part. Some hotel staff actually came with our tour guide to help tag all of our luggage there. They also scanned our visas and passports again. And they're doing this on the bus while it's moving while our tour guide is explaining us what's going on, but the actual tagging happened outside. This way they could sort things out and have all of our rooms ready. So when we got to the hotel, it was literally just come on in, go straight to your room. We'll bring your luggage up for you, which is really nice of them. We saw some stray dogs. We saw some cows. As we're on the bus ride to the hotel, our tour guide tells us the general things we need to know. He told us when supper is, and we'll get to go to supper. At a later point, which we're going to have our welcome dinner, he's going to explain to us all about what's this week's going to be like. They had given us our room keys on the bus, but as we came in, multiple people were welcoming us, and one of the same people who was tagging our bags and scanning our visas was also giving us bindis as we gave in. So you may not have noticed, but I've had one this entire video. So that's when they gave us the delicious peach iced tea. After that, it's like, you tell us our room number, we'll tell you where to go. So I got my room key out and one person literally led me to my room. And I've pretty much been here ever since. And my luggage was brought up after me. It was delivered by two different people. The doorbell rang 2 different times with the 2 different luggage pieces delivered at different times. But it's probably more efficient that way, actually. Just like, go get luggage, bring one luggage, bring it to the room. Don't worry about getting the matching luggage. Someone else will bring it. And it all works out. It's the same logic Amazon uses for much of their warehouse. And I came into this room and It is so nice. There are literally 6 bottles of water just for me. 6. We're only gonna be here like 3 days, and they're like liter-sized bottles. So I doubt I'm gonna finish it all. But at least I know I will be safe with my water consumption. I have a whole freaking balcony. There are matches in the ashtray, which is something I can confidently say I'm probably not gonna use. The toilet has a bidet. I had a huge shock when I sat on the toilet seat because it was heated. It's like, wait, what? I was not expecting this sensation. There's a flashlight in the room. It's very nice, like silk pillows over there. There are currently shredded marigold petals right next to my filming device that says welcome. The one thing that I was not crazy about that probably provides a nice ambient atmosphere to the room that I had to change immediately was the fact that the television was on. It had nice calming music and it was showing different advertisements for the hotel. But I spent a good 5 minutes looking for the remote. I found the remote eventually, and somehow I turned the TV off. I don't know how I did it because there was not an off button on the remote, which was a bit confusing to me. Part of it is I do have sensory processing disorders, particularly of the auditory nature, where sometimes I do not like it when I hear background noise. And like some background noise is okay, other background noise is not, and a TV going on the 24/7 is not one of those noises. The other thing is, even though the music was absolutely pleasant, as a YouTuber I have to be worried about copyright strikes, and I can't guarantee that music coming from the TV is music that I have permission to post. It's just safer if I turn it off, especially since I do not yet have the editing knowledge to separate various aspects of the audio. Also, the toilet has been running the entire time, which I'm assuming is just a factor of the toilet. If I was at home, I would have lifted up the tank of the toilet by now to make sure that the toilet was okay, but because I'm in someone else's property, it's not necessarily something I want to do. But yeah, this is an absolutely gorgeous hotel. Yeah, also on the bus ride home, we did learn several things about Delhi. There was some confusion going in about what was the difference between Delhi and New Delhi. It turns out that Delhi is the original city. It's the one that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. It has not always been the capital of India. The capital of India used to be Calcutta, but it got moved to Delhi in 1903. Some rich British people here started building New Delhi. And it's also called Loyton's Delhi. It's New Delhi. I was looking at a map of Delhi and New Delhi earlier, and I could actually see that difference. Delhi itself looks hodgepodge, but New Delhi looks like it has streets in it. Although the streets have been relatively curved, do look like wheels from a map. India has a population of 1.4 billion. They just passed China as the most populated country in the world about 6 months ago. I have been seeing a lot less people for a country that I thought was just going to be packed. I did find myself filming people when I thought I was filming art though. So I ended up waving to those people because they waved, and it's like, well, it'd be rude not to wave back. Also, we ended up seeing some tuk-tuks and electric buses. So they do have buses that run completely on electric, and the tuk-tuks run on compressed naturalized gas, which people say is more safe for the environment, but I am in doubt of that simply because I hear natural gas and I think, oh, fossil fuel. Like, where are they getting all this compressed naturalized gas from? Sometimes I hear like clean natural gas or clear natural gas, I'm not entirely sure, when I'm watching content about cruise ships. We also were told the reason why cows are considered holy in Hinduism, it's because the cows produce a lot of resources on their own right without necessarily having to kill them. Along with the buffalo, they produce milk, but apparently cow milk is more tasty than buffalo milk. The cow dung is used to give energy and also to build structures. It's like, yeah, if the cow's already producing that much without necessarily giving you its flesh, why not, right? Also, there are peacock signs around. And it turns out that much of India is green, that has greenery, and there are peacocks in the greenery, so we may be able to see some peacocks. But we drove by a bunch of embassies, and they pointed out the Prime Minister's house, which has a whole bunch of soldiers standing guard around it, understandably. And there was one point where I took a picture that I realized I may not have been supposed to take a picture, because I realized afterwards that I took a video shot of a soldier in a compound. And it called back to when I was in Kenya, I was like, ooh, should I not have filmed this? Because Kenya actually bans filming of certain governmental buildings. Our guide has not said anything of the nature though, so maybe India doesn't have the same rule. But a lot of street signs are in both English and Hindi. Yeah, at this point, I'm going to freshen up a little bit because I've been in these clothes for a while. Arrange things a little bit more to my liking. I've been told there's a pool. I think I saw a pool on my window. I don't know if that's a swimming pool or just a fountain. I'm sure I can ask and figure things out. There are also info books about India in this room, which are pretty nice. But yeah, I'm going to get a little bit more recombobulated. If anything of interest happens later on, I may talk about it a little bit more. Literally, like within 15 minutes of me ending filming last time, my doorbell rang and they brought me food. Even more food. There's so much food in this room already. Although some of it I'm afraid to touch because I think they'll charge me for it. But they brought some sort of pastry dish and there's a white chocolate building design that said India on it. At the time that I was eating it, I thought, wow, what a nice design on this white chocolate. What I didn't realize as I was eating it was that it actually represented an Indian monument. The Indian Gate is a war memorial to the Indian soldiers who fought with the British during World Wars I and II. And we actually saw it lit up at night. They light it up at night every night in colors that look very similar to the Indian flag. I assume it's supposed to represent the Indian flag, but it looked closer to the Italian flag because it looked more red than orange to me. But they also had these other little sweets, and one was macaroon. I already ate the macaroon. It was like the fluffiest inside of a cookie I've ever seen. There was some sort of garnish on it. I was like, it doesn't look like it's edible, but it must be edible because I'm assuming everything on this plate is edible. And then it was. It ended up being auspicious timing that the guy brought chocolate when he did, because I was thinking like, oh, I'll have to go down to the lobby and ask him how to get to the swimming pool. But this person came to my door. It's like, well, why not just ask him? So I did. And the instructions were a little bit unclear. I ended up asking again when I got down to the lobby. Turns out the elevators do not all go to the same floors. As I'm walking down to the pool, it's a little bit of a maze to get there, but once I get there, I come across this hallway of absolutely stunning oil paintings. A whole variety of styles, but it looks like it was all painted by Indian artists. It was just impressive. I ended up going back down there later on just to show you some of the artwork. That'll come in the montage. But the artwork was actually situated at about eye level height for me, a little bit higher. And it's interesting to see how the times go because the paintings were there to be sold. There were prices on it, but on the bottom of the little placard was a QR code. I guess it's to lead you to the site for where you can buy the artwork. I did not test it out for myself, but that's what I would assume that would be. I had to walk by the bar in order to get there. There were sports on TV and it was interesting to see baseball, and there were no American teams playing it. That's a very, very odd occurrence for me. But it's good to see that baseball is not just an American sport, even though our World Series only contains 2 countries. I think the game that they had on, like one of the teams was New Zealand. But then I made it to the pool and I had gotten dressed up for the pool. I'd already gotten into my bathing suit and the cover up and whatnot. And I walked there and there's a bunch of these lounge chairs covered with yellow towels, and I brought my own towel down because I wasn't sure whether I would have to ask to get the towel or not. It turns out I didn't have to do that. There was a picnic basket there that had a yellow towel available, although there was someone who came up to me right as I entered and asked me, "What's your room number?" Which was necessary because in order to get to the pool, I had to walk by a door that said only hotel patrons at this point. So in order to make sure you're a hotel patron, you better know what your room is. So he was answering my questions and I was like, oh, good. And then he was like, wait, but where's your bathrobe? And then I hadn't brought the bathrobe down, so I had to explain to him, oh, this is the cover up. My bathing suit is underneath this. And he seemed to be okay with that. But when I was preparing to go down, it felt less awkward to go down in what looks like a flowy dress than a bathrobe, but I guess I shouldn't have felt as awkward about it as I did. I did get the times for the pool tomorrow, so depending on how I feel about everything tomorrow evening, I can decide to go swimming again. The pool itself was very, very nice. It was super long. I think it's possibly the longest pool I've ever swum in. I do not believe it is the pool that I saw from my window, but it looks very, very similar to what I saw from my window. There are these two statues of these very decorative rectangles in the middle, and there's some steps going in. It's very shallow, and going into the water at first was like, ooh, it's a little bit cold, but once I actually started moving and swimming around with it, it was the perfect temperature, and they did regulate the temperature a little bit, and both ends were shallow, and then it got progressively deeper as it got to the middle, and at its deepest point it was 1.8 meters, which I think is slightly less than 6 feet. It was still above my head. I do not know how tall I am in meters, but I do know there was a point where the water was above my head, which does make for more enjoyable swimming when you can actually go to the bottom and get completely covered and not necessarily touch the floor of the swimming pool the entire time. There were a couple other people from the tour who were there. One of them eventually came in and she was just going back and forth, so I swam with her back and forth for a little bit, having a conversation. I did some laps there, and I also did some of my typical swim activities before she got in, where I do some somersaults, and I try to do a handstand, and I spin around. I spent probably a good hour in the pool, and then I got out, and on the way out I saw 4 people coming in, and I thought they wanted the chairs that were right there, so I told them, hey, I'm about to clear the chair if you want them, but no, they were just a bridal party who wanted to take their picture, and then they're going back out. I was like, oh, congratulations. The only reason I know they were a bridal party is because one of the ladies was wearing a sash that said bride to be. And after that, I came back up here and I took a shower because I don't know what's in pool water that might affect my hair, and I don't necessarily want to leave anything like that in there. The shower is one of the simplest showers I've ever operated. There's only 2 handles, and one deals with the temperature. Mine was perfectly set at 38 degrees Celsius. Human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. So I knew it would be a nice warm temperature for the shower, which is how I like the showers. I like them hot. The top part had a handle, and it goes between 1 and 2, and then you look inside the shower and there's a big shower head that's up there, and then there's also a wand that you can take off and move the water around your head. So I ended up moving the water to the wand and took my shower that way, although I think I may have sprayed some of the water outside the shower, but I'm not sharing this room with anybody, so it doesn't really matter. Shortly after that, I decided to take some time to read the book, but then I realized my mind was mush, so then I set an alarm and took something resembling a nap. Never quite fully went away, but it was relaxing enough that I felt kind of out of it waking up. Then I went downstairs for supper. We were going to meet for the welcome dinner in the lobby of We were told to go to a particular restaurant for the welcome dinner, but I knew I was going to hit the lobby for it, and I never really made it to the restaurant. I still don't know where that restaurant is because the majority of the people were in the lobby. The original plan was to eat in the hotel, but then they heard how loud we were. The majority of us are loud Americans, and that was not the vibe that they had in that restaurant. It was pretty much like hush-toned, nice and calm. Our group isn't exactly calm. So we loaded ourselves back onto the bus, minus 2 people. We don't know what happened to one person. The other person had some sort of medical issue that they had to deal with. We ended up going to a restaurant that served a traditional Indian meal. We were informed that they were talked to ahead of time, and the cooks were told to keep it low on the spices because these are American. But yeah, we had a very nice chatty bus ride. I ended up sitting next to someone who apparently has been to many of the same trips I have been to, but on different times. It's quite amazing to hear just how similar our stories are. It's also enjoyable to see where the slight differences are as well. India is quite different at night. Like, it's dark out, but there are still like the random lights here and there, and there's still crowds of people. Like, the crowds of people that I was expecting to see are finally coming out. When we got off the bus, we had our first interaction with Indian crowds, not in a formal setting, because the bus was too big to go down the street that we needed to walk down to get to the restaurant. So cars are parked every which way. There are motorcycles that are parked right next to each other, jammed next to each other. You can barely get on one without touching another motorcycle. I got a glimpse of the traffic on the way there. There were 3 rows of traffic, but the lines weren't very neat. There have been several times where I was sitting on the bus and I look down the window and there's a motorcycle just zooming by right underneath us. And there's only like that much space in the road. Most of the cars are pretty small, but I don't think there's an abnormality on India's part. I think it's just the fact that Americans are obsessed with having big cars, and so it makes everyone else look tiny. The Americans are the exception again here. We ended up walking into this little plaza that was filled with people, and had 3 restaurants right next to each other, and it had fairy lights just hanging down. There's a whole bunch of string lights, and there's little balls at the end because a bunch of the string lights are not unwound. They're just left there in this coil, and it's lit up very bright. It looks very nice. We ended up going to a restaurant called the Chicken Inn. When we went inside, we were told that our meals paid for this time, but if we wanted alcohol, that was on us. I didn't get any alcohol. I may have enjoyed alcohol with this meal, but considering how much jet lag I'm likely to experience today and the fact I'm going to be taking melatonin in order to wake up, and also this is my experience trying a cuisine that I'm not familiar with, I figured I'd take it easy on that front. It was a buffet style meal, but we never actually had to walk up to the buffet. They just had a whole series of booths for us. There's about 6 people to a table. Half of them were upholstered armchairs, or like fabric covered armchairs, and the other half was the couch. So I slid into the couch because I figured it'd be easier for me to do so, and found out that there are quite a few quilters in this group. It's nice to hear people talk about other crafts. One lady made an absolutely amazing quilt that she showed a picture of us, and she also showed a picture of some sandblasted glass doors that her friend brought into her house. They started us off with the miso soup. The broth tasted very nice, even though soup's not really my thing. And then they had some sort of vegetable sushi roll thing. After that, they brought the main meal. I didn't know they were going to keep on bringing things after the initial bringing of the dishes, but all the dishes were brought pretty much around the same time. There was a chicken curry, and there was a paneer, they kept calling it. It's like a cottage cheese, tofu, mushroomy type of dish. Most people really liked that one. The really spicy dish I did not touch. It was lentils. They had some plain white rice, and they had some naan bread. In the silver dish, there were 3 separate dishes, which we were told was their salad. So there was some red onions, some orange onion curls, and a green grayish sauce. Like, well, I'm here to try food. Let's try some food. The orangey onion curl, which I dipped in mint sauce, was super spicy, more spicy than I was expecting it to be. I later found out it was the sauce, it was not so much the onion. And then the other item there, the red onion, was soaked in sriracha, I was told, which is like a citrusy sort of base. And that was not spicy, but it was bitter. And to be fair, I like bitter things even less than spicy things. Actually, they're about even. I had some water with the meal because they brought out the water in a bottle so I could just pour it into the glass and see what was going on. I also got a Sprite because I wanted some flavor with the meal. I looked at the Sprite bottle, and the Sprite was made in India, but unlike other countries where I get the soda in another country and it's straight sugar in it instead of high fructose corn syrup, in the ingredients it did mention preservatives. So it's like, it's sweet. It also tastes different, but it doesn't taste like that. I absolutely love this and will continue having this for the rest of my life difference. It's like, I could take it or leave it. But I was holding the can up, and I was looking at the can to try to look where it was, and the waiter thought that I had a problem with it. And I was like, no, I'm just being curious. They ended the meal with tea or coffee. I ended up getting neither because I'm not a fan of both, but also I didn't really want to be super chemically charged awake too much longer after the meal. On the way back from the restaurant in the plaza, there were people trying to hawk their goods, and There's one hawker who was particularly persistent. To put this in perspective, we were told as part of our tour, if we wanted to buy something from an individual hawker, don't try to do it ourselves. Come back to the tour bus, tell our tour guide, and then he will go get it for us. Or he will go bring the guide to deal with it for us. Because otherwise, if we just engage with them there, everyone will come flocking and they're not going to listen to the tour guides when the tour guides tell them no. It's like, it was already understanding. If someone just comes up to me asking if I want to buy something, the answer's already going to be no, unless I want otherwise. And with that, I have to go talk to the tour guide. As you can imagine, I stand out in the crowd. And I'm not the only one with colored hair this tour. There's another lady who also has colored hair, and he went up to her, it's like, oh, nice hair, and tried to sell this thing. It's a bracelet. Yeah, a whole bunch of them. And then, like, he kept asking people from the tour. He also asked me, so we all kept saying no, and then we left the restaurant and he asked us again, and we said no. So he ended up running towards the tour bus, and he ended up talking to the guide himself, and our tour guide decided out of the kindness of his heart to get us all bracelets. I admire the hustle that that person has in selling his goods. It is a nice bracelet. You can see we have some wooden discs here in all sorts of lovely colors, and then we have some wooden beads that have some metal caps, and we have some metal beads that are in the middle, and we have some jingle bells on the bottom. It's a nice little token of appreciation from our tour guide. It's the type of thing where I probably never would have bought it for myself, but if someone's going to gift it to me, I will absolutely accept it. After we came back to the hotel, we met in the lobby where we had to download some apps into our phone, and that is pretty much how the rest of my day went. It's been a very packed day. Super packed. So at this point, I'm going to start winding down for sleep. I'm going to set alarms so I can be alive, awake, alert, and enthusiastic for tomorrow morning and get to exploring India on my first full day there.
Just walk straight. Anything you want to eat, you just let me know.